My name is Jack Li. I am a medical doctor, also a dermatologist, and also a professor in biomedical informatics. Recently, I also assumed a position. It's a president-elect of the International Medical Informatics Association. That is the largest international organization on medical informatics. Um, I also work as a dermatologist in Wenfang Hospital. My main affiliation is with Taipei Medical University. The current AI movement is mostly about one type of algorithm called machine learning. And the reason why machine learning did not work 30 years ago when it was first invented and started to work very well in the past 5-10 years is because of the availability of big data. But when you talk about medical, that big data is mostly internet based. But when we talk about medical big data or healthcare big data, it's not available on the internet. So actually the development of internet does not help the machine learning in healthcare data. So you need really big and comprehensive and accurate healthcare data. There is very few examples around the world that you have a population more than 20 million and you have a centralized healthcare database. Not even Singapore has a centralized healthcare database, although they're famous for their management and all that, and they have like less than 6 million, 7 million people. So in Taiwan, we're kind of exceptional in terms of having a centralized healthcare database for the 23 million people for 25 years. Okay, I think the other good example will be Denmark. They do have a centralized healthcare database for 30 years, but there are only 6 million people. So, so having this wealth of database, and of course, the value of the data gets higher when it's closer in timeline, right? Like data 30 years ago would not be that useful today. So with that scale and the amount of detail and granularity that we capture, I could say that Taiwan has the best healthcare database in the world. Okay, one of the best, if it's not the only one. And that is available through academic collaboration. So when you ask about startup, so how would a startup get access to that kind of data? All they have to do is to work with some professors from any university in Taiwan, and then they could apply for it, and they can get access to the data. However, there are some regulations to how you can use the data and the way you access it. Generally, they do not release the data. So you have to go to a place like a data center. It's like a clean room approach. You don't bring your device in, and you go there and you access data. And the thing that they allow you to take it out of the room will be the result of your computation, not the raw data. So I don't want to get people confused or over expected that you can take everybody's data outside of the room. But you could access data inside the room. But there was a problem. They are not very accommodated to machine learning yet. Okay, they are starting to do it. So the machine, the servers, and the computers in that clean room isn't that powerful to compute all types of machine learning to fulfill the needs of all types of machine learnings. But they're starting to do it. But it's easy. It's not hard to access the data set, even if you're a small startup. All you have to do is work with some professors from a university or research institutions. Although Australia is a big country in terms of geographical size, they're about the size of America, but their population it's only a little bit more than Taiwan. I think Taiwan's 23 million, they're 27 million. So we're comparable in terms of population to Australia. And we're also comparable in terms of medical resources, hospitals, clinics. We probably have more big hospitals than Australia. And we are very good in terms of containing the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, Taiwan has less than 10 people died of COVID-19 and less than 600 people diagnosed of it. So everything goes almost like normal. People wear a mask to gatherings, but except that, every business is almost like normal, and hospitals were like operating every day just like we did before. There was a dip in terms of people visiting hospital during I think among like March, April, and May. But now everything's back to normal. Well, I can call it a new normal, but it's still kind of normal. So we're not consumed. The hospital were not overwhelmed or consumed by any COVID-19 patients or respiratory kind of infection. It's working very normally. So it will be, for now, it would be the greatest place to have a clinical trial in the world because everything is normal. And there are 20 big hospitals in Taiwan. We call them medical centers. These are hospitals that usually more than 1,000 beds, and they usually have a dedicated department that would help outside partners to do clinical trial in the hospital. And they get you connected to people who with the specialty. They get you connected to patients population, the cohort that you need. Yeah, and they usually have a pretty good database that you could check your cohort and frequency of visits before you even start the clinical trial. In our Taipei Medical University system, we have 3 teaching hospitals. It's a total of about 3,300 beds. We do have a system that actually help you fetch patient cohort that fits a trial criteria. So it's automatic. It's not even, usually the doctor would identify the patient as a suitable subject for a specific trial, but we actually have a computer system that would do that for the doctors. So, I mean, it's just one of the examples that how important it is for the hospitals to attract pharmaceutical company or startups, biotech companies to do a trial in the hospital. So they're very welcome, and it's a friendly environment. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the International Medical Informatics Association that I mentioned, we did issue a letter of recommendation to WHO in April, and there are 4 major recommendations. The first one is being preemptive and predictive, meaning collecting the data, do the prediction, and find high-risk people, isolate them, or things like that, right? The second recommendation is telemedicine. I mean, really use telemedicine to its maximum, okay, whenever possible, and pay for it too. The third one is about data sharing. So across country, how do we do data sharing? And the fourth one is about transparencies. So we don't want fake data, we don't want withholding information and stuff like that, because that's exactly the reason why we have the pandemic today, right? So, so in terms of predictive, in terms of telemedicine, there are just so many opportunities that people from the world, from the international startup that can work with our IT companies. Because our IT companies in Taiwan, the big ones, they're specialized in creating, hundreds of millions of motherboard, hundreds of millions of notebooks, computers, but they're not very well versed in fields like telemedicine, predictive medicine. So if some of the startup, if they're interested in this field, they could work with them and potentially creating, chips that can predict whatever you want to predict. potentially creating chips that can facilitate telemedicine sessions, because we do have the whole, the whole workflow. I mean, ecosystem from software. So you make a piece of software, and they can put it in a chip that they can duplicate hundreds of millions of times in a very short period of time. And they can put that in every cell phone, every notebook. So that's the potential that we have. If you have an application that you think every phone owner or a lot of phone owner, a lot of notebook owner would need, you can do it here. And it will be easy to distribute them because that's what we do. Again, when we talk about AI today, the most popular algorithm is machine learning, right? So most people almost use them interchangeably. Although AI has a lot of different algorithms, one category is machine learning. And that's the most powerful one, as we just getting to realize, if paired with big data. And the big data means it has to be multidimensional. It has to be, the big data has to be complicated. The more complicated it is, the more powerful the end product. And it has to be temporal, meaning if you have a long time of the data, it's a much better thing. And it has to be accurate, and it has to have enough granularity, right? So we do have the healthcare data that match this requirement. And not many places in the world that you can say that we do have that. So I think we have a special advantage in terms of developing medical AIs. Although, a lot of medical AI right now focusing on medical images. Okay, we may not create more images than GE or Siemens, these big companies, but we do provide a very economical way of generating these images with reports. Radiologists would read the image and generate reports. I think we're probably one of the cheapest, most inexpensive country in terms of medical image reports. Okay, so and they're high quality reports as well. They're well formulated, they're standardized, and they're high quality reports. So I think in order to get those data, you need the good images. You also need the good reports to pair it up in order for any medical AI innovations in this respect. So I think that's something that's really precious and really is the driving force for startups that will be interested in this field. Yeah. One of the advantage, or it's probably also a disadvantage sometimes, is that we have a very affordable healthcare system. We have universal coverage of the healthcare cost. We probably have one of the lowest out-of-pocket healthcare payment in the world. I think it's about 20%. So every $10 you spend on healthcare, $8 are paid for by the government, your employer, and a little bit of your own salary. And the cost is very, very low compared to the U.S. cost. We're probably only like 3%, 5% of the cost that you would spend to get the same healthcare service in the U.S. It's crazily low. So I have to say that again. If you stay one night in the hospital and you pay $3,000 in the U.S., in Taiwan you pay 3,000 NT dollars, which is 1 to 29 or 28 ratio. So in terms of say ICU, intensive care unit. So it's the difference is very dramatic, but the quality is comparable. So it's crazily cheap. That's a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that you generate a lot of data high quality data in a very inexpensive way if you have to generate it afterwards. And if you have to obtain them, because the cost of generating the data are not high, so the price of getting them would not be high. The bad thing is, since it's very low, so any automation or AI methods that reduce the process or reduce the complexity of the process, the gain are also small because the price was just so low, right? So I would encourage all the the startups around the world, if you're interested in AI, medical AI, Taiwan is a very good starting point, but it may not be your final market, or it may not be your only final market. You don't want to define Taiwan as your only or one of the few final market, because the healthcare cost is relatively very low. Yeah, I think one thing I can kind of comment on would be, if you're an international startup and you want to work with our hospitals, it's probably easier than a local startup, because our healthcare system tend to they tend to get a lot of innovation from international partners. So it's weird, but I would say they would trust an international partner more than a local partner sometimes, not always, but especially on innovative products, innovative service, they would have more tolerance and give you more leeway if you're an international partner than a local partner.